Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of Meet Me at Midnight. I am so excited to be back. It has been an absolutely crazy couple of weeks. I had my last day at my old job, and then the day after that, I had a root canal, which was weird and kind of sad, but also kind of exciting. The whole process of having a root canal obviously sucks, but my tooth feels great now, so that's the exciting part. This episode is being released on Friday as usual, so happy Friday the 13th. There are a couple things I have done in honor of this spooky holiday. One, I went and got discounted tattoos with my sister on Wednesday. And then two, this week's episode is going to be a double feature. So that means the first half of this episode, I will have a true crime topic. And in the second half, I will have a paranormal story lined up for you guys. So strap in, and I hope you guys all enjoy the spooky day. So part 1 is about Jack the Ripper, who is one of the most prolific and uncaught serial killers of all time. So the Jack the Ripper murders occurred in East End of London from 1888 to 1892. Since this is a cold case, I really can't give you guys any background on who Jack the Ripper is. It's really all speculation. But we'll touch on some of the speculated backgrounds and ideas of who it could be as we go. So first, I kind of wanted to set the scene of London in the 19th century. So in terms of what it was like during the times of the murders, the UK had just been launched into a more modern state. So during Queen Victoria's reign, or the Victorian era, parts of England quickly improved after the Industrial Revolution began. So gas lamps were installed all over the country. Railways were being built to ease and quicken travel, and large factories were built for the manufacture of all kinds of new products. London is a big city, and the main upper class areas of London were drastically changed. While places like Whitechapel, where Jack the Ripper killed his victims, were turned from rural land to city landscapes, those lower class areas were still, lower class. They were dimly lit with gas lamps and smoggy 24/7 from the factories. So Whitechapel and the East End were the first port of call for migrants, and this area became a mass slum. So petty crime like theft was super common here. A lot of wealthy business people would set up shops here and never visit. And the poorest members of society would end up in these slums, including Jack the Ripper and his victims. So despite being a high crime area, the East End had never had as heinous a criminal as Jack before. So how many people did he murder, and who did he murder? So the first thing I want to say is a lot of this is speculation. There are only 5 confirmed murders attributed to Jack the Ripper, but many more are believed to be tied to him as well, but couldn't be confirmed. So the 5 confirmed victims were murdered within a 4-month period in 1888. First victim being Mary Ann Nichols, whose body was found on August 31st. Annie Chapman, who was found September 8th. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine or Kate Eddowes were both found on September 30th, found and killed September 30th. And then Mary Jane Kelly was found November 9th. So all of his victims were women and were assumed to be prostitutes. All but one of the victims, Kelly, were killed while soliciting on the street. There is a lot of evidence going either way, though, so it's really unclear whether these women were really prostitutes or not. The only one that was confirmed as a prostitute was the last victim, Mary Jane Kelly. Each of the 5 women had the same wounds, so their throat was cut, the body was mutilated in a precise manner, which was indicative that the killer had knowledge of human anatomy. One time, half of a human kidney, possibly from one of the victims, was mailed to the police. I mean, at the time, it's 1888. The technology they had, or rather didn't have, with that stuff, the police weren't able to confirm if it came from one of the victims or not, but they believed that was the case. They didn't have any other mass murderers running around at the time. Anyways, this, like sending the liver to them was another reason why one of the more popular theories on who Jack the Ripper is that he was a surgeon, doctor, or butcher, something to do with anatomy or a medical background. And then someone who claimed to be the killer also sent a taunting letter to the police and signed it as Jack the Ripper, so that name stuck. This was a letter, I actually found the letter, so this was the letter received on September 29th, 1888, so this was the day before the double homicide happened on the 30th of Stride and Eddowes. So this is what it said. Dear boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I cannot use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope, haha. The next job I do, I shall clip the ladies' ears off and send them to the police officers just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands. Curse it, no luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha. If that doesn't say enough about the mental state of the killer, I don't know what does. The man sounds absolutely delulu. So first thing I want to point out is the proper red stuff mentioned that he kept in a ginger beer bottle. Obviously blood. But it got thick. Second thing I want to point out is the letter. Okay, so the letter is believed to be from the true killer at the time, but they can't really know. And even later on, which we'll talk about more, they think it's a hoax. But the comment that, quote, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance, alludes to the fact that the next day the killer commits a double homicide and murders 2 women in one day versus the previous 2 that were spread out. And he did one, waited some time, and then did another. So this was a change in like his pattern. And then 2, his threat to, quote, clip the lady's ears off and send it to the police officers was proved mostly true when Catherine Eddowes' earlobes, the second victim of the day, had mutilated earlobes. The police couldn't really ignore those coincidences and were forced to treat the letter as if it came from the real killer, which, I mean, if I was that police officer, I would have assumed it was from the killer as well at that point in time. I feel like that's just too many coincidences. So the letter was published after they found 2 more bodies, and then more and more letters, a lot of them hoaxes, started getting delivered to the station. At this point, the police just believed everything was a hoax, but still investigated each letter for authenticity, and they were no closer to catching the killer than they had been before. So, if it's to be believed that these 5 were the only ones that could be tied to Jack the Ripper, and they stopped in November of 1988, what happened? So, for serial killers like Jack the Ripper, there are only a few reasons why the killings would stop all of a sudden. 1, he may have died, possibly by his own hand, shortly after he killed Mary Kelly. 2, he may have been living with his family and they either realized he was insane and incarcerated him in a lunatic asylum, or possibly even handed him over to the police. I feel like if that was the case, though, the police would have, connected him to the murders or at least investigated him, like based on what the family had reported. 3, unlikely, but another explanation is that he moved somewhere else and continued killing, and the connection was never made. It's an unlikely explanation because the murders of Jack the Ripper were reported all over the world, and if a similar killing spree had popped up somewhere else, it's most likely that somebody would have made the connection. And the 4th scenario is that at some stage in the days or months that followed the murder of Mary Kelly, the police finally got the break they had been hoping for since the killings began, and Jack the Ripper was finally caught. But again, I say, wouldn't this have been broadcasted? Like, wouldn't there have been papers saying, like, we've caught the killer? You know what I'm saying? But many of the officers on the case said that they knew the identity of Jack the Ripper, but all of them had a different name to give. So here were some of the suspects in the lineup. First, many people accused Prince Albert Edward Victor, who was Queen Victoria's grandson. That didn't really lead anywhere, though, because he wasn't even in London during the murders. He had a solid alibi, despite the many accusations he got. And then the second suspect was John Pizer, aka Leather Apron, which was mentioned in the letter that the police got. They said that joke about Leather Apron gave me real fits. And Leather Apron became a suspect when the local prostitutes were interviewed and said they were fearful of a man they called Leather Apron. All the girls knew about him was that he wore a leather apron, sometimes wore a deerstalker hat, and that he was running an extortion racket, demanding money off the prostitutes and beating up those who refused. Sergeant William Thicke, who was on the Jack the Ripper case, was convinced that this man named Leather Apron was John Pizer, so they set out to search for him for questioning. On September 10th of 1888, Pizer was found in question and would provide solid alibis for the nights of the first 2 murders, so they had to remove him as a suspect. Another one was Charles Ludwig, an extremely promising suspect who had been arrested for attacking several people with a knife. He was imprisoned and then proved to not be Jack the Ripper when the September 30th murders occurred while he was in prison. They had a lot more other suspects. Obviously, there's like all kinds of hearsay and speculation on who it could have been. Any criminal was a suspect, let's be honest. But no matter how many promising suspects the police had, none could have been convicted of the murders, and no evidence was found to support the claims of guilt for each of them. And to this day, the case remains unsolved. No one knows why the murders stopped or what happened to Jack the Ripper. That's part of the reason why people are still so obsessed with this. There are even people called Ripperologists who like deep dive into this case and try to figure out who did it. And like give more background. If I had more time on my hand, I might commit to being a ripperologist, but I can't right now. I am going to post some photos. I looked through quite a few. I don't really feel comfortable posting some of them because of how graphic they are. If you do want to see some of the crime scene photos, you can go to the Jack the Ripper Tour website, and they have the crime scene photos on there. There's really one, like, famous photo that I've seen a lot when researching this case. That's pretty graphic. The rest of them are just slightly disturbing because you get to see, like, the dead bodies of the victims. Like not full body, but you get to see like shoulder, like neck up almost of them. So if you get queasy, I probably wouldn't look them up, but it's literally just the Jack the Ripper Tour website. I actually went on the Jack the Ripper tour when I was in London in 2017. It was really cool, but also creepy experience. Like to be in the murder locations and see the images of what happened there at the same time. Um, Gives you kind of a nauseous feeling, but it was very cool. Anyways, that is Jack the Ripper. I wish everybody, I wish we had more information on him because it's so fascinating. And I really love cold cases. Okay, love is a loose word. I really, cold cases really, pique my curiosity, let's say. Like I just need to know who did it. So it also irks me because there's no resolution, there's no ending. I don't get to know what happened, but it is a really cool case. I didn't want to quite deep dive into like the ripperologist side of everything. If you want to, feel free to do so. It is super interesting. But there are all kinds of nuances and theories and things like that that people had. The Jack the Ripper Tour website is a great resource. They have all kinds of information, photos, pictures of the letters, but I'll post the pictures of the letters as well for you guys to see. But yeah, so part 1 is over. I'm going to take a quick break and then I'll come back and we'll do part 2. So insert spooky elevator music here. What's up, guys? I'm back. Okay, so time for part 2. This is the paranormal story. The topic is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. This is a psychiatric hospital that is located in Weston, West Virginia. It is also known as the West Virginia Hospital for the Insane and the Weston State Hospital. It was open for patients between October 1864 to May 1994. And the asylum was created in response to the needs of America's people with mental disorders. And it was also established to appease Trans-Allegheny citizens who had been asking for public works improvements. So construction of the asylum began in 1858 and was completed in 1881. It is the largest hand-cut stone masonry building in North America. So from an architectural aspect, it is definitely renowned. It was built to house 250 souls when it first opened, and by the time it closed in 1994, the hospital had housed well up to 2,600 people. Obviously in poor conditions, they were far over capacity. As the asylum became more crowded, the staff were outnumbered and conditions continued to get worse and more incidents occurred, like setting fires, attempted hangings. One nurse also went missing and was found dead at the bottom of a set of stairs. So it was quite literally chaos inside of there. Patients were admitted for various reasons, and not all of them were mental health related. In addition to patients who were admitted for mental health related issues, other admission reasons included asthma, women who wouldn't listen to their husbands, gag, tuberculosis, and men could even drop off their wives for almost any reason, like wanting to keep a mistress but wanting to have the wife out of the way. I do have the official list that is posted in the asylum of reasons that people could be admitted. It is a crazy long list, but I am going to read it because It's absolutely batshit, and y'all just need to know. I will also post a picture of it. But here we go. So, intemperance and business trouble, kicked in the head by a horse. I'm sorry, that's not funny, but hereditary predisposition, ill treatment by husband, imaginary female trouble. I wonder what the hell that means. Hysteria, immoral life, imprisonment, jealousy and religion, laziness, marriage of son, masturbation and syphilis, masturbation for 30 years, medicine to prevent conception, menstrual deranged, mental excitement, novel reading, nymphomania, opium habit, overaction of the mind, overstudy of religion, overtaxing mental powers, parents were cousins, periodical fits, tobacco and masturbation, political excitement, politics, religious enthusiasm, fever and loss of lawsuit, fits and desertion of husband, asthma, bad company, bad habits and political excitement, bad whiskey, bloody flux, brain fever, business nerves, carbonic acid gas, congestion of the brain, death of sons in war, decoyed into the army, deranged masturbation, desertion by husband, dissolute habits, domestic affliction, domestic trouble, dropsy, egotism, epileptic fits, excessive sexual abuse, excitement as officer, exposure and hereditary, exposure and quackery, exposure in army, fever and jealousy, fighting fire, suppressed masturbation, suppression of menses, the war, time of life, uterine derangement, venereal excesses, vicious vices, women trouble, superstition, shooting of daughter, smallpox, snuff eating for 2 years, spinal irritation, gathering in the head, greediness, grief, gunshot wound, hard study, rumor of husband murder, Salvation Army, scarlatina, seduction and disappointment, self-abuse, sexual abuse and stimulants, sexual derangement, false confinement, feebleness of intellect, fell from horse in war, female disease, and dissipation of nerves. That is quite a list. I feel like they listed masturbation like 6 times. I feel like they could have just mentioned that once, but that's just me. I don't know anything about lunacy. But based on that list, I'm pretty sure everybody could have been admitted to this asylum based on that list. Me alone for novel reading, are you kidding me? Half the fucking world would be put into the loony bin because of just that alone. Anyway, so that is the full official list that is at the asylum. During the time that the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was open, there were a lot of different types of treatments that were used. I mean, these are, quote, conventional therapies that everybody's heard of, like horror stories. So first one being shock therapy, which is where small electric currents are passed through the brain to cause a brief seizure. And the seizure is intended to change brain chemistry and improve symptoms of mental health conditions. Solitary confinement was also a treatment. Which, is that really a treatment or is it avoidance? The staff had full control to put the patients in solitary if they were uncontrollable, or even if they weren't and the staff just wanted to put them in there. Which, that really scares me about, like, mental health like facilities and things like that, because you hear horror stories all the time of like patients being abused by the staff. Another treatment was hydrotherapy. Patients would be locked in tubs of water that were either dangerously hot or dangerously cold for extended periods of time. Forced sterilization and lobotomies. So aka ice pick lobotomies, which is where doctors would jam an ice pick like tool into the back of the eye socket to separate the bone from the frontal cortex. The goal being to cut nerves, to cut specific nerves to reduce emotion and stabilize mood, which to me kind of sounds like they were making zombies or serial killers, so you pick. But those are just a few of the different kinds of therapies that were offered there. It's estimated that around 30,000 people died at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in its 150-year-old history, which that is a lot of people. Most were buried in unmarked graves on the hill above the asylum. Some were buried with markers with their like patient number above, like to mark it. The state of West Virginia actually tried to exhume all the bodies and identify them with obviously like more updated methods, but they stopped after finding more than 4,000 remains just from the get-go. If you've learned nothing so far from this podcast, you should at least know that a sketchy, morbid history and dead people make the perfect grounds for hauntings. So this place is haunted as shit. So with all that said, here are the hauntings of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. So in general, people there, as with most haunted places, people experience seeing dark shadows, apparitions, objects moving on their own, disembodied voices and cries, bangs on the walls, and breaking glass, among other things. There are also a few specific ghosts that are known as well. So the most popular being Lily, and Little Lily is one of the most well-known ghosts and most visited on the 4th floor in Ward R of the asylum. So Lily's mother is believed to be Gladys, who was sent to the asylum when she was allegedly raped by Civil War soldiers. When she was admitted, she found out that she was pregnant, and she unfortunately passed away while giving birth to Lily. The nurses took her in and named the little girl, and she grew up at the asylum. When she was 9 years old, she contracted pneumonia, which ultimately led to her death. Now people will visit Lily's room at the asylum to leave her toys, gifts, stuffed animals, and candy. And it's reported that the toys will move and the candy will disappear. Another well-known group of ghosts, I should say, are Dean, Big Jim, and David Mason. Both Big Jim and David Mason were criminally insane and were included in the asylum's top 10 most dangerous men that were housed there. The two inmates repeatedly tried to hang Dean, but had little success. And unfortunately for Dean, they switched up tactics one day and forced Dean's head down under the bedpost and then jumped on the bed repeatedly until it killed him. Dean himself is known to be a quiet spirit, but he can be heard speaking sometimes through like a spirit box or something. And then, or even just like when you're sitting there, some people hear voices. However, when the two shadows of Big Jim and David come around, he seems to disappear. And it's said that when Big Jim and Dean show up, the energy in the room changes and people report feeling ill or generally uncomfortable. So in Solitary, there is another ghost, or a few ghosts, I should say. But there's one story specifically that is well known about a former boxer who suffered from injuries that rendered him emotionless and occasionally violent. When he was locked in solitary, he attempted to beat down the metal door that closed behind him, and when he was placed in the solitary cell, he ripped one door off its hinges and left visible dents in the other door. And when the door was opened, he handed the door that he destroyed to the nurse and calmly returned to his room. It's like the room just pissed him off, and then he was fine. Or you could say he was possessed. Ooh. But the rooms used most for isolation tend to have violent energies attached to them, with visitors reported being pushed or scratched, as well as disembodied voices saying, "Get me out of here." Another ghost is Slewfoot, and no one knows how the man known as Slewfoot got his name, but supposedly he roams the upper floors and killed and tortured people in the upstairs bathroom. And to this day, he haunts the bathroom and the upstairs floor still. And then we have Ruth, who is on the first floor, and she was a female patient at the asylum, and she resided in the Civil War wing with the veterans. And according to her legend, she hated men with an unbelievable rage, and to this day, some people say that she will throw things at men if given the chance. Same sister. I also found, so a lot of the, stories I found were very vague like that, and kind of all around, sums up, non-specific events that happen at the lunatic asylum. But I found a Reddit story of somebody who used to be a tour guide at the asylum, and they shared a few of the experiences they had. So I'm going to read you 3 of the experiences that they talked about. So first one is, one evening while training for the job, I was on the first floor with a couple coworkers while everyone else was touring upstairs. We were kind of killing time, quietly observing the area. Light from outside was coming in through the windows, casting on the inner hall's wall. In that light, I watched the perfect silhouette of a man from head to hip walk through that light from left to right. I said something about it, and the 3 of us watched as an arm and hand moved into the light from the right side. I immediately ran into the room and began looking out of that window for someone outside. There was no one there. At the time, the realization that the ground to the bottom of the window is 7 feet didn't even occur to me. Which is crazy. I mean, obviously, apparitions and shadow figures are extremely common in super haunted places like this. I don't think I've ever heard of a story of, seeing something in broad daylight, but that might just be because I watch, YouTubers and, ghost hunting shows who always do things at night, because it tends to be more active at night, but that makes sense. The next instance that the writer talks about is when they're doing the Estes method in the room where Dean was murdered. So the story goes like this. For 10 minutes, I sat and listened to nothing but radio static through the spirit box. No blips of radio. Nothing except the ch-ch-ch-ch of the static. LOL, I was starting to get bored when I heard a woman's voice say evil. So I spoke up and repeated the word evil. Next thing I know, my coworker is shining her flashlight in my face to get my attention. I pull out the earbud and she was practically frantic, saying, "It's time to go, time to go." So we haul ass out of the room, down the hall, down the next hall to the center section before she would even tell me what happened. While I was hearing nothing but static, she said she kept hearing what sounded like someone shuffling their feet and walking just outside of the door. She said she spoke up and asked, "Whoever is out in the hallway, are they nice?" That was when I spoke out and said evil, which would scare me shitless, so I don't blame the other tour guide for being like, "We gotta get out of here right now." And then the third encounter that I'm going to talk about from her story, or his story, was June 3rd. After an hour or so of hearing a female's voice, One instance even sounded like she said my name, as well as banging around, footsteps, literally running sounds on the hardwood floor toward us. I sat quietly on the floor with the group. I started to feel dizzy, lightheaded, and gross. I told myself it was my imagination and that I'd be fine. A few minutes later, I started to feel this intense burning sensation on my lower back, just to the right of my spine. Again, I told myself it was all just my imagination. The burning sensation kept amping up, getting worse and worse. I told myself that I didn't want to be that guy and say anything in front of these people, you know? Finally, I got to the point where I had to say something. I asked my coworker with us if there was anything there, and she was like, OMG. There on my lower back, just to the right of my spine, was a mark that looked like a burn or an abrasion about 3 to 4 inches long and about 1 inch wide. Now I'd seen other such claims made by visitors of scratch marks, and the like, often writing them off, and the marks were always gone within an hour at most. I had a visible marking on my back for almost a week. That's crazy to have something stay like that for almost a week. So like definitely not your imagination, definitely not like a quick thing where like you get like a quick scratch and it like disappears. Like that shit stayed. According to the rest of her posts, they also, like, even to this day, that spot on their back continues to bother them, which is kind of crazy. Like, it's like the nerves are like all messed up or something now. But if I ever find myself on the East Coast anytime soon, I will definitely be visiting this asylum. They do offer all kinds of tours, from historical ones to ghost hunting tours as well. But yeah, super haunted, super creepy place. I have a thing for morbid history and abandoned buildings, so right up my alley as per usual. But yeah, that is it for this week's episode, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the double feature, and thank you so much for listening. You guys have no idea how much it means to me. I hope you all enjoy the spooky day today and go do something fun. I'll probably be getting more tattoos while you guys are listening to this. But yeah, happy Friday the 13th. Bye.